All right. Well, welcome everyone to the March 12th Housing Coordinating Team call. I'm Cheryl Cohen. I serve as the Commerce Housing Division Administrator and Executive Director of the administratively attached Montana Board of Housing. I'm pleased to be joined today by Tara Mestel with MSU Extension. She's their Community Vitality Program Leader. And she's going to talk a bit later about housing and education and community coaching for rural communities. And also joined today by Ann Schwen with the Community MT Division, our Community Planning Supervisor, and she's going to talk a bit about the Community MT Community Technical Assistance Program. But before we dive into all of that, I'm going to speak a little bit about the Montana Board of Housing and our intention to procure a statewide housing needs assessment. So for a little background, in 2023, the Montana Board of Housing had a performance audit by the Legislative Audit Division here with the state of Montana. And that performance audit was focused on the administration of our federal low-income housing tax credit program, as well as our overall board governance structure. And one of the recommendations in that performance audit was for us to really consider what data we are using to provide to both developers and community members, as well as to our board members, about where affordable housing is most needed in the state of Montana. And we presently, through the course of that audit, we provide a lot of demographic information to our board members about population in counties, population growth over periods of time, the amount of affordable housing, both 9% housing credit and 4% housing credit and tax-exempt bond projects that have been built and already placed in service in each community, as well as been approved and on the horizon. But we did understand the feedback from the performance audit on what other data could we provide to really answer the question, where is affordable housing most needed in the state of Montana? And so the update today is we've had a few conversations with the Montana University of Montana Bureau of Business and Economic Research, BBER. And we're working with them now on a scope of work to collaborate with them to develop a statewide housing needs assessment. And the intent of this assessment is one, to look at housing needs geographically and regionally. So we may not dial in at the local level as much as what a local or regional housing needs assessment would do, but we do want to look holistically across kind of Montana regions. Factoring in things like what do we know about housing production in those areas, about population growth, and about the incomes of the residents that are residing in those communities. And so we're working now with BBER to develop a memorandum of understanding and scope of work for that community needs assessment. And our goal is to have a draft assessment completed perhaps around December of this year. And our hope is to then finalize that assessment and make it available broadly for the community and for developers and our board members for the start of the new year. And so before I introduce Tara and Ann to go through some of their programs, I wanted to pause and take some time to solicit input from any attendees on the call about what would be helpful or meaningful for you as we consider finalizing this scope of work, and what sort of questions could this assessment help answer that would be advantageous. So it's not just an assessment that might be helpful for the Board of Housing and our work, but that could also be leveraged and useful for other community needs. So if anybody has questions or comments about the housing needs assessment for a statewide approach and what you would like to see for a resulting product, feel free to raise your hand or put a comment in the chat. And if maybe Jason could help me catch any flags or comments. So I'm going to pause here and see what people have thoughts about.
Shyla's got a question, looks like.
Okay, Shyla?
Hi, Jason. Hi, Cheryl. For the record, my name is Shyla Patera, from North Central Independent Living in Black Eagle, Montana. I'm happy to be joining the housing coordinating team today. It's been a while for myself and Nichols, but on the statewide housing assessment, I think we need to also, first of all, we need to not only focus on accessibility and universally designed programs, but how to maximize our current housing stock in rehab and other opportunities, and also for developers making sure that the sites they're choosing can maximize HUD contract usage in Montana, um, Board of Housing contract usage, so that people with disabilities and low income Montanans can stay um, in their homes. And I would just like to see um, more. The last housing assessment you did for the rentals, which helped Montana get our Section 8 and our housing choice voucher program back up and running, was very short. So if the housing surveys are part of what we're looking as a long-term strategy, I would like to have it longer than 2 weeks, because that was um, the Montana Housing did great work in that, but I we couldn't some of us couldn't access all of our renters that we wanted to take the survey. So I would assume it's um the same for developers and other property buyers as well. So that those are just my comments for short term. I'll write some up as I think of some more. Thank you very
Excellent.
much for
You bet.
having me today.
So just to comment a little bit on Shyla's thoughts, and then we'll go to the next commenter. But Shyla was referring to the fair market rent reevaluation that Commerce undertook in late 2024 and submitted to U.S. Housing Urban Development in January of 2025. And that survey was under a very specific federal code or regulations for the housing choice voucher and related programs. And it had a very defined deadline to HUD. And so it was a very robust, fast-paced moving project. And the intent for that survey was to really gather information about the actual costs that low-income renters were paying throughout the state of Montana, to then seek HUD to approve an adjustment to what are called fair market rents. And so Montana's fair market rents, we had perceived to be lower than what we were actually seeing for rental listings in our communities, even for units that would be available to lower and moderate income households. And the results of that study, they are available on the Commerce website, and I can post in the chat. But HUD approved an on average increase of about 16% for those FMRs throughout Montana's 56 counties. And that in turn allowed us to increase what are called our voucher payment standards for the Housing Choice Voucher Section 8 and other rental assistance programs. Fair market rents are also factored into a number of other HUD CPD and Emergency Solution Grant programs. And so the result for Commerce's statewide Housing Choice Voucher program is that it increased our budget authority from 19.5 million to about 31.7 million from 2024 to 2025. And we were able to reopen our wait list in July of 2025. And over the course of the last 6 months of 2025, screened about 3,400 families and issued over 700 vouchers to families that met our eligibility so they could find rentals in the private market. So yeah, the intent around that specific survey was different than kind of a broader statewide housing needs assessment. But thank you for your comments, Shyla. And then Tara also posted in the chat, wondering if we were looking at availability in addition to affordable housing. In rural places, availability at any cost can be an issue. I think that's a great point. And one of the other things we've talked about with the Commerce Research and Information Services team, our economists upstairs, as well as with BBER, is particularly availability of housing in resort communities where you may have a lot of housing, but it is not available for rental or homeownership opportunities. So I think that's a really good comment, that in some parts of, especially rural Montana, we know that there may be, for example, one USDA RD or HUD Section 8 property, and that's the only affordable housing available in the entire community. So really great comments. I know that there was another hand raised. Was it Francis?
Yeah, hi. My name is Francis. I just posted in the chat too. But yeah, I was reading about the social housing model that's been adopted in Seattle, Chicago, and is being explored by a lot of various smaller cities, similar to Missoula and Bozeman, throughout the country. And I'm just wondering, what protections are being explored for those who are above the federal affordable housing guidelines, or like income limit, and then are also a little bit outside of the voucher eligibility guidelines, like the teachers, firefighters, or service workers who are rent burdened in our communities and being priced out. Thank you.
That's a great question, Francis. And we have been monitoring a little bit of what's going on with social housing. I previously lived and worked in Seattle for a number of years before moving to Montana. So I've been kind of keeping tabs on what's happening there. I think the intent of our statewide housing needs assessment is primarily going to be focused on housing needs for households at 80% of median income and below, because those are primarily what we're able to target with the majority of our fund sources. We do have some programs that allow us to help finance the new construction, rehabilitation, or preservation resident-owned communities up to 95% of median income. So we'll be probably thinking about that as well. But we may not go more broadly beyond that, since the programs that we administer can't serve borrowers beyond those limits. But I think, certainly up to members of the community to connect with your elected officials to share your thoughts about housing needs for more moderate income households who may be above the income eligibility for the programs that we serve. There may be elected officials interested in learning more about social housing and what that might look like in Montana. Other questions or comments related to the statewide housing needs assessment? All right. Well, with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tara Mastel, who's going to chat with us about MSU Extension. Thanks so much, Tara.
Thank you so much. Gosh, I really am excited to be here today. Thank you so much for having me. My audio must be okay. It looks, yeah, good deal. Great, thanks. Well, I guess I want to start out with a little story. In the beginning of 2025, so last year, we collaborated, MSU Extension collaborated with Montana Healthcare Foundation and NeighborWorks Montana to offer an educational program helping rural communities to complete a housing needs assessment. It was a really great collaboration. Extension, we are the outreach arm of Montana State University, and we have extension agents in every county. So we really focus on rural community vitality. So we have the connections in the rural places. We have agents in every county who work there, but we don't have expertise in housing. But when we did our needs assessment in 2022, which we're still working off of, housing was the top need expressed in our housing needs assessment. And so we're sitting here, this is our top need, but we don't have that housing expertise. So we collaborated with NeighborWorks Montana, who of course has the housing expertise. They were seeking more connections in rural. We also collaborated with Montana Healthcare Foundation to offer this educational program that we did. Of course, Montana Healthcare Foundation has housing expertise, and they have a strong interest in fund some grants for housing needs assessments on a local level. So we offered this program in 2025. It was the second time that we had offered a program like similar to this, but this time was more successful than the last one. We had 170 people register. We had 2 open educational webinars. where we were really kind of helping people understand what is a housing needs assessment and help and kind of advocating or showing them how they could do one themselves. You don't have to have a special consultant to do this. So we had these 2 webinars, and then we invited people into a learning cohort to help, where we would walk them through drafting this needs assessment. So we had about a dozen people that joined. The cool thing was about a third of those that joined were native, in native communities. So we were glad to have a really great group and a good group of folks from native communities. The program was great. We had the 2 webinars, but then we had this cohort, and we met every couple of weeks, and it's going really good. People were showing up, participating, engaged. But after a while, we noticed that people weren't doing the homework that we assigned for them. And after a little bit, I was, because we're educators at Extension. That's what we do. We bring the education created at the university out to the people of the state. And I was like, we need to do something here. So I just volunteered to interview. I interviewed about 9 of the 12 that we had, and found that people were enjoying the sessions. They had learned a lot. They appreciated meeting others that are in their similar situation, and the folks that were in it were not really housing experts. They were people in small towns trying to figure out how to do something about housing. But they weren't able to make any progress on their housing needs assessment because they didn't have the capacity. We had gone into this thinking that the challenge was the know-how of how to do a housing needs assessment, but what we learned was that, in fact, it's the capacity that these rural folks they just did not have the ability. They didn't have the time. They didn't have the time and the space in their day-to-day work to create this. So we kind of came away thinking, wow, it was a sobering realization. So here's these 3 groups completely ready to help. We wanted to help these communities, and we came away like, wow, we can't help them, because what they need is something more intensive. So then I proposed, because we're educators in Extension, and we do a lot of community coaching. So I proposed to my colleagues at NeighborWorks and Montana Healthcare Foundation is, what about a housing, like a coaching program? So somebody like me, an educator, would do some statewide community educational programs like we did, really aimed at these very rural community volunteers that are low expertise in housing, just trying to get them started. And then at the same time, enter into some more intensive coaching relationships with 3, maybe 5 communities. We actually do this kind of coaching in the work that we do with Rural Community Vitality in a number of ways. We are running the Heart and Soul program in a couple of communities, and we have done the Horizons program in the past. So this is a very common model. So I proposed this idea, and my colleagues loved it, and so I wrote it up. I can put that in the chat so you can see the document. But basically, that's what I'm proposing. So I went to Julie Flynn, and I just asked, and Antoine too, like, here's this idea. We have some interest from a funder to fund a portion of it, but is there any way to fund more of this? I need about we want to do a 2-year trial, about a little over $100,000 to round out the funding to try this out. So that's what I'm excited to just throw this idea out to you, a little bit more about what it would look like. It would be there would be a regular monthly educational program on housing topics of interest, and it's really targeted at very, very small communities, really 35,000 or 3,500 and under people that's who we work with, is these very small towns. They don't have a housing professional. They may not even have one in their region. They certainly don't have one in their town, but they have a challenge in housing. Sometimes they can't hire a teacher because there's literally not a house or an apartment for the teacher to move into. But so you've got like a hairdresser or a loan officer or a retired person trying to figure out, how do we solve this housing problem in our community. So that's who we're kind of aimed at. This program would be aimed at. So there would be a regular educational program. This person that would be in this position would volunteer on housing organizations and groups to be connected to the housing community statewide. And then they would have this intensive coaching relationship with 2, maybe 3 to 5 communities. Those communities would be selected to ready to take action. They're motivated. They just need a little bit of handholding, really. So this community coach would go to the community from time to time and then work with them remotely, maybe helping them complete a community survey, help gather secondary data, help them write it, not write it for them, but help them write their own needs assessment with some pretty intensive technical assistance, help them identify what are the opportunities for housing in their community and what are their challenges, and help them connect to regional and statewide assistance. We're proposing a 2-year pilot. The cost of total for the 2 years would be $214,000, which that includes salary, fringe, and a little operations fund so they could get around. The work that I do in Extension, I really focus on rural community vitality, and in small towns, rural Montana, rural communities, they run on volunteers because they don't have larger organizations with a lot of capacity. So the volunteers, they make the nice things happen, like the rodeos, the murals, youth sports, but they also do the essentials. And so that's who we're kind of targeting, is people in small towns that want to make stuff happen. So that is our idea. I will put the little write-up that we had in the chat, but I'm just curious if anybody has any reaction to this, or any thoughts, or any ideas on how we can round out this funding. I mean, we'd like to do it for a minimum of 2 years. It'd be awesome to do it longer. Yeah, so thanks for considering this idea.
Well, thank you so much, Tara. I think it's so exciting that you guys are focusing on those really small rural communities that, as you said, just don't have capacity or housing professionals. And so folks are wearing multiple hats as volunteers to try to support their communities. And that's both the beautiful thing about small towns and cities in Montana, but also a big challenge for us to see how we can come together to support those communities. Do folks have questions or comments for Tara? And feel free to either raise your hand or drop a comment in the chat.
Anybody have $100,000 just sitting around collecting dust?
And Tara, if folks wanted to follow up with you, what would be the best way for them to get in contact with you? Or are there any kind of calls to action that you would like to leave attendees with today?
Yes, I will put my email in the chat. I'm trying to figure out how to add the file. I'll share the file to so people can kind of read a little bit more if they want to. So I'm an educator. I'm not really a fundraiser. I mean, I have certainly written my share of grants. So I'm just sort of embarking on, like I said, we have a funder that's interested in this and interested in funding part of it. We work a lot with the Montana Community Foundation, and they are interested in helping us connect with others that might be interested in funding this. So I'm just kind of embarking down the road of trying to round out this the funding for this. Hopefully it's not a pilot. It would be great to have funding on the long term. So I don't really have a call to action, except for if you have ideas for me, because I'm not a fundraiser. I'm an educator. So if you have ideas, let me know.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Tara. And for folks that would like to reach out to her to learn more, her email is in the chat. And at this time, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ann Schwen to talk about the Community Technical Assistance Program here at Commerce and what it can do.
All right. Thanks, Cheryl. I'm happy to be here as well, and to add to sort of this portfolio of options that we have for helping communities. So as Cheryl mentioned, I'm in the Community MT division, kind of a sister division to housing, and we manage a lot of grant programs. But the program that I work in specifically is known as Community Technical Assistance Program, and maybe some of you are familiar with that, or you've heard the term CTAP, but it hasn't been really clear what we do. I've been here for a couple of years and, trying to get the word out more about our programs because I think we have a lot of opportunities and we are specifically here to be providing technical assistance to communities across Montana. What that means is it's pretty focused on land use planning, or it has been really focused in land use planning, but we are getting more into really community planning and trying to think comprehensively and help these communities, many of the sizes that Tara was referring to, smaller rural communities that don't have the capacity or the knowledge or a full-time planner on staff. And you have someone who is trying to figure out how do you navigate the laws for land use planning for a rural community or for a county. And how do we think about what is the vitality of that community? How do they want to grow? Where do they want to grow? And how do they plan for that? So we provide a lot of assistance with growth policies and subdivision regulations and annexations and zoning, all of the terms that sort of set the parameters for how communities grow. But and we have a small pot of money, small team. I have 2 other planners that work with me, and then we have a team of consultants that have already been procured, gone through the state system, and this small pot of money. So if I have a community that approaches me and they really need some help with doing some kind of community planning, as I mentioned, it can even be trails, it's housing, which is what I'm going to get to in just a second. Doing community needs assessments or housing needs assessments or anything that they really want to try to tackle. And they don't have grant opportunities, or there's something that they need to sort of get them from A to B to sort of launch a project or help them get some of the pieces in place that then they can apply for additional funding. Anyway, they approach us. We work with them. If it's a good fit, we develop a scope of work, and then we solicit estimates from our consulting team and say, who's available, who would like to do this, where does it fall in their wheelhouse? And then we're able to work kind of as a 3-legged stool with one of the planners and our consultant who can provide a lot of technical assistance, and then with the community to help them do their planning. It's been pretty fun. We have a lot of projects across Montana and more coming in all the time. So if that's something, I'm not sure exactly who's on here and who might be thinking about those needs. Thanks for adding all that in there, Cheryl. I was going to do that in a minute. But the exciting piece that we have now that we're really starting to launch, I'm not sure if you guys are aware that Commerce, we coordinated with the League of Cities and Towns and submitted a PRO housing grant application to HUD, and PRO stands for Pathways to Removing Obstacles. And it's really focused on housing and housing affordability. We were awarded that grant last year, but as we know, sometimes HUD, it takes a little bit of time to get all the pieces in place. We're not quite ready to roll it out. We're very close. It's a $7 million grant. About $5 million is going to the community, the larger communities that were mandated to implement the Land Use Planning Act after the 2023 legislature, and they're on a really quick timeline to try to be compliant with that by May of 2026. And a big component of the Land Use Planning Act was actually to really assess housing, to do a very intense housing needs assessment and mapping future land use planning maps, but then to also do zoning reform that would allow the kinds of housing that the community identified, and identify locations of where that housing can go, and then ensuring that the zoning was not limiting, sort of matching all of those pieces and parts together. So a big portion of the grant is going to these LUPA, the 10, actually 11, because Lewistown opted into it, communities to help them get all of that stuff finalized. The other portion of it is coming directly to Commerce and to my program. And we are developing a grant program. It's probably going to be about 1.6. Well, there are going to be two components. Sorry, let me back up. One section of it, portion of the money, we are going to put toward developing statewide resources that everyone can use. And I am looking for ideas about what kinds of resources might be really helpful. A couple of things that I'm thinking are like shelf-ready building plans for smaller homes, the actual architectural that could be permit ready. That's a little tough to do it statewide since there are, each community is a little bit different. But if we can think about how to do something that communities could access easily, that's one thought. Or doing some other targeted ideas toward missing middle. Francis, I think that was kind of one of the comments that you put in the chat is not just these really low income, but how do we think about sort of that affordable housing or workforce housing for many people in communities where it's just not available, right? If you don't have housing available, low income housing is even more difficult, but housing across the spectrum is a challenge. So then the remaining money, the 1.6 million, we're going to create a grant program, and what we're trying to do, and we are coordinating with Cheryl and her team. So if we have this statewide housing needs assessment that sort of generally talks about, as a state in Montana, what do we need? I want to have a grant program that then fine tunes that, and we are really focusing on planning. But I'm still leaving it pretty open, and I'm looking for suggestions from you guys about what are the most important kinds of planning that you need to do locally within the community. And what I'm thinking is, okay, maybe you have data from this statewide housing needs assessment, or you can gather data from our community planning platform that Cheryl put in the chat. If you are still a community that doesn't know exactly, so you have a housing needs assessment and you've identified that, and maybe you have zoning getting in the way, maybe not. Maybe you want to zoom in and look more specifically at housing types or site locations, or you actually need plan designs for a specific site. Because it's HUD, we're staying away from construction related dollars, but thinking more broadly about planning and how can we tee up, how can we be, Commerce statewide, honing into local and connecting with Terra and MSU, and, really deploying that out in all the other communities across the state that can really use some help. So, the grant program, it'll be a competitive grant program, and I'm thinking somewhere about $30,000 to $40,000 a grant, possibly more. And I am open to suggestions on that right at the moment. We just have the basic outline set up that it does need to be for planning, not construction. So I'm going to pause for a moment and let you guys pitch in and tell me what kinds of planning is going to be most helpful, and or resources that we could develop that are statewide resources. Anyone have any suggestions?
Feel free to raise your hand or type in the chat.
Francis, I'm going to pick on you again, because when you're talking about sort of that social housing, right? I mean, I keep trying to think we need to be more innovative about what we're doing. And even though I'm a planner, and planning is super important. I think it's important that the plans that we have are going to lead to something that's really beginning to solve the problem on the ground, and not just planning for planning's sake, but saying what kinds of tools and resources What do communities need to know? And how can we help sort of grease the wheels to get projects going, identified and then going?
Well, I'll just echo what you said, and that, planning for planning's sake. I think in all of these topics, whether we're looking at a statewide housing needs assessment, local communities, counties, or on a regional basis undertaking their own, growth planning, zoning, housing needs assessments work, or very, very rural small communities helping that work, is how do we do it in such a way that it's not just something that gets done and then sits on a shelf, but how do we operationalize these plans so we can see real impacts on the ground in terms of new homes available, existing homes in need of rehabilitation and accessibility improvements, and other needs in the community for accessibility, energy efficiency. We want to make sure that all members of our communities are able to get around their spaces and find the housing that will best meet their needs. And so I think we're all on the same page that we want to move this from not just the planning, but how do we operationalize and make those impacts really clear for community members on the ground.
Right. And Francis, I see your hand up, but, and I have, one of the things that I know many communities struggle with is that if they have existing buildings and they're historic buildings, thinking about preliminary architectural reports that would help get them to that adaptability or accessibility or mixed use kinds of projects, having some of the planning in place that helps them then apply for funding to sort of make that a reality. Francis?
Yeah, hi, this is Francis. This isn't about the social housing part of it, but I'm at Montana Legal Services and help out a lot with like the Montana Law Help website that we have and making like accessible resources. So I think I'm a big fan of accessible resources in general for the public and making things easy to understand. And yeah, I like the idea of um, making it more easy to navigate for people in their communities to better understand like the world of planning and zoning. Because I think, at least, I mean, for me, it's hard to sometimes get why there's not more housing available and what's standing in the way. And then you start to get into the world of like mixed use housing and like parking spaces that need to be available and stuff like that. And I really like the idea of like creating some kind of pamphlet or resource or packet that says like, what is zoning? What is planning? What do you need to know before you, like when you're looking at your community to try to better understand what's like standing in the way and how to like what the Montana cadastral can be used for and why you might want to look at that and kind of laying out really simply for people the steps involved to better understand and then how to go about um, trying to make a difference. I like just the idea of like defining everything and then saying what is available and how it all connects. And yeah, I think that that's an exciting idea.
Good. So I would encourage you to visit our website. Either of those links that Cheryl put in the chat will get you to sort of an abundance of resources. And we have videos on there that talk very basically about planning and about zoning and, how that works. Because I know it is super complicated. It's kind of it's an area that a lot of people, it's fascinating to me that people aren't just riveted with wanting to read zoning codes and subdivision regulations, but zoning is intended to guide development, but in many cases it can impede development if it's too restrictive. And so, we want to help communities navigate that and think more holistically about what is getting in the way, right? So the grant is Pathways to Removing Obstacles. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out how can we be a resource both generally with documents and, things, training and better understanding for the general public, but also for specific communities that really want to dive into it and say, okay, we're ready to address this. And we have, it's a small town, and we have a building that we think is ideal for mixed use development. And we're trying to get an investor to come in and rehab it and do some housing, try to think about long-term affordability. One of the things for me, thinking about housing like the land trust communities, and are there other models? How can we be innovative and creative here in Montana, even though we aren't really big cities, but how do we think about accommodating more people within our community footprints, where there is infrastructure available and it's accessible for all, and you don't have to use a car, and all of the things that some of our residents may struggle with. How do we have housing that's available to age in place? I think Shyla had in the message earlier. So how do we think about planning for that and getting projects on the ground? Danny, I'm glad you feel seen. Go ahead.
Hey everyone, and hi Anne, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
My name's Danny, and I work with a handful of nonprofits and local governments as a lobbyist, and also do some strategic planning and comms stuff in the interim. And I'm thinking about, in addition to the complexities of land use planning and navigating, tax credit programs or grant programs or whatever, there are programs through other state agencies. I'm thinking of like the BOI bond, and, I'm not even remembering the names of those programs now. But anyway, those are really, I think, powerful tools that are available to local communities and nonprofit housing developers, like community action agencies and HRDCs. Habitat for Humanity comes to mind as well. Do you all work with BOI or other state agencies around helping people understand how to take advantage of some of those programs? So
I don't specifically. I'm going to kick it to Cheryl, and that's the advantage to us both being in commerce, right? And so how do we coordinate and understand? I can't get into the tax credits and the loan programs like Cheryl can.
Really great questions, Danny. So I did drop the website in the chat to the Montana Board of Investments housing programs. They have the Montana Housing Infrastructure Revolving Bond Program, as well as a revolving loan program and a bond guarantee program. So, lots of variations on financing. There's also the Link Deposit Program and a new resident-owned cooperative, multifamily-owned cooperative loan program that was established following some legislation in the 2025 session. We actually, and I'll put a plug in the chat, but our Montana Housing Partnership Conference will be, I believe it's May 18th through the 20th at Fairmont Hot Springs. And we have two panels that are happening there. And one of them is on state agency programs that support affordable housing. Director Villa from Board of Investments, Adam Gill from the Montana Facility Finance Authority, and a representative from DEQ for an energy credit program that they're administrating will be on that panel. We think it's really important to showcase it's not just the Montana Board of Housing or the Commerce Housing Division here that have programs that can support communities. So we want to make sure that we're referring people to those different programs. I talk with Adam Gill pretty regularly. Director Villa as well. So we want to encourage people to leverage all of the different state programs that are here. We also will have a panel on state agency programs that support residents. And Department of Public Health and Human Services will be presenting on a variety of programs that they have that are targeted for services for residents in our communities. So it is really tricky to navigate sometimes. And if you're, an average, community member, if you don't even know where to start, you may not know where to go on some state agency's website to even find the type of assistance that you're looking for. And so that's really the role of, Anne's program to help provide that referral and community assistance, as well as anyone on our team, Julie Flynn and her staff with the community housing programs, Jason Hansen with the Board of Housing's multifamily development program. We're constantly sharing information and working with potential applicants and community members to direct them to the resources that may be well suited for the projects that they're proposing. So I'll drop in the chat the Montana Partnership Conference website. We are still registering people now, but it's starting to fill up at the venue. So would really encourage people to join us in May to learn more about these programs. And we have a lot of other content offered as well.
Thanks, y'all.
Before I open it up to just any other community updates from any attendees on the call, are there any other final questions for myself or Tara or Anne?
Cheryl, I see another comment from Francis talking about mobile home parks and manufactured home communities. And agree 100% with you, about supporting those and finding ways, because that's a big leap for those residents to take on the ownership. One of the areas that we can help with, and in our program at CMT Community Montana, we have the Montana Coal Endowment Program and the Community Development Block Grant Program that can help with some of the infrastructure costs and helping communities navigate when they take on water and sewer for their if they become a resident-owned community. So that's just another place. So it is about trying to pull all the pieces together and help these communities navigate and find funding to support the projects that they need to do.
And I also dropped in the chat a link to our Board of Housing Multifamily Fund sources. We do have some programs that can specifically assist with the development or preservation of mobile home parks for resident-owned communities. We are taking applications for the programs that are available at that website, and those applications are due April 13th, and Jason Hansen can correct me if I'm wrong. But anybody that hasn't heard about those, you could contact Jason Hansen or just reach out to us on the Commerce website at housing.mt.gov, and we'd happy to take any questions as well. Well, any other shout outs or community updates that folks on the call would like to share? Well, I'll go ahead and put the Housing Partnership Conference link in the website or in the chat here. I'm pulling it up now. And just want to give a very big thank you to Anne and Tara for joining us today. We'll get this recording posted to the Commerce website shortly. We have a housing coordinating team page. And do reach out to either of them if you have additional questions about their programs. And we are always interested in community feedback about what type of topics or guest speakers would be of interest to all of you, so we can have really good, meaningful content on these quarterly housing coordinating team calls. So you're welcome to reach out to us, again, housing@mt.gov, and I'll put that in the chat. And we wish all of you a really good rest of your week, and hopefully everybody stays dry and doesn't blow away with the winds that are happening out there. So
thank you, Cheryl. Thanks,
all
Tara.
right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, all.